Namaskaram. Today I am going to be talking about verse 21 of Upadēśa Undiyār. There is a direct connection between this verse and the previous verse. So I will first remind what Bhagavan said in the previous verse. Or I'll go back 2 verses first. That is what he says in verse 19, is when one investigates within, what is the place from which one rises as I will die. This is nāṇavichāra. So when we investigate ourselves keenly enough, that's when we look at ourselves, turn within and face ourselves and look at ourselves keenly enough, we will see what we actually are, and thereby ego will be destroyed. That is the implication of that verse, and that is this alone is what is called nāṇavichāra. Nāṇavichāra, in nāṇavichāra, jnana means awareness, so it's investigating awareness. The awareness referred to is ourself. We ourself are that awareness. As he says in verse 13 of Upadēśa Undiyār, nāṇamē. Oneself, who is awareness, alone is real. So that is what we're investigating when we investigate ourselves. We are just investigating the basic awareness I am. So when we investigate that basic awareness I am and thereby see what we actually are, I will die means ego will die. That is the false awareness I am so-and-so will die. Then in verse 20, he is a continuation of that. He says, in the place where I emerges, that the one appears spontaneously as I am I. That itself is the whole. That is when ego is the false awareness, I am this. That is, it's a false identification of ourselves with something other than what we actually are. So when we turn our attention within and see ourselves alone, we will thereby experience ourselves as pure awareness, and that is, we'll be aware only of I am, not of anything other than I am. So we'll no longer be aware of I am this. So ego is thereby eradicated. In the place where it merges, the place where it merges is the place from which it arose. That is ourself. That is our real nature, is the place from which we rise as ego and into which ego merges back. Every day when we sleep, ego merges back into its source, into the place from which it rose, which is our own real nature, the fundamental awareness I am. So when I merges, the one, appears spontaneously. Here, the one implies the one that actually exists, the one thing that actually exists. The adu, we can take it here as referring to the reality, Brahman. It is often referred to as that. So that is the one ultimate reality, appears spontaneously as I am I. That is, whereas ego is the false identification, I am this, I am this body, or I am this person, or whatever. Our real identity is only I. So when we experience ourselves as we actually are, our experience will not be I am this or I am that. Our experience will be I am I. That is the meaning of the term nāṇeṉuñ, that Bhagavan uses here. That is, in Tamil, the am is implied. If you have a sentence with a subject and a subject predicate, the copula, the verb linking the two, is unnecessary because it's understood to be the verb to be. So nāṇeṉuñ means I am I. And then he ends this verse by saying, aduttam pundramam, that itself is the whole. Actually, no, in the verse it's the order of words in the verse is tan adu pundramam. In a natural prose order, that would be aduttam pundramam. That itself, the tan there is acting as an intensifier, implying that itself, or that alone, is the whole. The whole, the Tamil word pundram is from the Sanskrit word purna, which means the whole. the whole in the sense of it is the fullness, it is all that actually exists. So the one reality that shines forth as I am I, that is the infinite whole. We can that infinite isn't specified there, but it implies, when we talk about the whole, it implies the infinite whole, the entirety of what is. So that's what he talked about in verse 20. Now we come to verse 21, which is the verse we're dealing with today. What he says in this verse is, he refers, that in this verse, he uses the word adu, which is referring to what he was talking about in the previous verse. What he was talking about in the previous verse is the fundamental awareness, is the real awareness, I am I, that the infinite whole. And then in this verse, he says, what he talks about that. What he says here is, the verse is, nāṉeṉuñ poruḻ ḻāmadu nāḻumē, nāṉaṭṛa tūkkattum undīpaṛa, namadiṉmai nīkkattāl undīpaṛa. If we split it as a Padacchēdam, it's nāṉeṉuñ poruḻ āmadu nāḻumē, nāṉaṭṛa tūkkattum, namadu iṉmai nīkkattāl. If we make an Anvayam, that is to arrange it in a natural prose order, it would then become nāṉaṭṛa tūkkattum, namadiṉmai nīkkattāl, nāṉeṉuñ poruḻ nāḻumē adu that is the order in which it would be as a prose. Or we could put adu at the beginning, because there's a subject and a subject predicate. So whether we put it at the beginning or at the end, it's okay. It amounts to the same. So the meaning of this is that adu is at all times. Nāḻumē. Nāḻumē means literally nāl means day, but nāḻumē means all day. It implies always. So that is always, at all times. At all times means not only that is in past, present, and future, all the three times. That is eternally, it implies. So that is at all times the poruḻ. Poruḻ here means the substance, or the true import of the word called I, nāṉeṉuñ. Why is it always? Why is it at all times the true import of a substance of that word? What that word actually refers to? He gives a reason. Because of the nīkkam means removal or exclusion, because of the exclusion of our non-existence, even in sleep, which is devoid of I. Here, this is, it's a strange way of putting it, because of the removal of our non-existence, but it's a double negative, in effect. It's because we are not non-existent in sleep, is what it implies. We are not non-existent means we are existent, but there's a reason he expresses it in this way. I mean, it's partly for poetic reasons, but it's also to emphasize the fact that we exist in sleep. To say it more emphatically, we are not non-existent. It's a way of emphasizing it. And sleep, which is devoid of I. Devoid of I, this I means ego, refers to ego. So there's no ego in sleep, but we remain. So what remains in sleep, that is the real import of the word I. There's a lot of very deep meaning in this verse. Firstly, in the previous verse, he said that one thing appears as I. Though he says there it appears, he expresses this a very similar idea in verse 30 of Upadēśa. But in verse 30 of Upadēśa, what he says in verse 30 of Upadēśa, as soon as the mind reaches the heart, inwardly investigating who am I, when he who is I dies, one thing appears spontaneously as I am I. And then he says, though it appears, it is not I. That means though it appears, the I that appears and disappears is ego. That is, ego appears in waking and dream, it disappears in sleep. So appearing and disappearing is the nature of ego. It's not the nature of reality. So why is it said that the reality appears? That is, so long as we as we mistake a rope to be a snake, it seems that there's no snake there. When we recognize, oh, it's only a rope, metaphorically speaking, the rope has appeared. The rope was always there, but we didn't recognize it as such. So it is that recognition of our real nature, which is what appears. So metaphorically, it is said it appears. So when he talks here about it appearing, we shouldn't take it literally. That is, it's a fresh clarity of awareness. That is, we are always aware I am, but we are not aware of, that is, we are always aware that we are not aware what we are, because we mistake ourselves to be something other than what we are. So when we recognize what we actually are, that there's a fresh clarity. That fresh clarity is what appears, but actually it is what is ever existing. That's why he says in this verse 21, that is always the true import of the word I. This is a very, very deeply significant term, a deeply significant statement, because we are always using the word I, and generally when we use the word I, we are referring to the body and mind that we seem to be. I am sitting, I am talking, I am thinking. All these, we are taking this body to be ourself. But even when we take this body and mind to be ourself, we are still aware of our existence as I am. So that is, though there's a confusion in our awareness of ourselves, we mistake ourselves to be something other than what we actually are, we are always aware of ourselves. We are always aware I am. So that's why Bhagavan said it is, even when we are referring to this body and mind as I, underlying that experience, I am this body or I am this mind, is that fundamental awareness I am. So what I always actually refers to is only that self-shining awareness I am, that fundamental awareness of our own existence, which we always experience as I am. We experience as I am now in the waking state. We experience as I am in a dream. We also experience it in sleep. That is, in sleep, we are clearly aware I am. So that's why he says it is always the true import of the word I. Even when we rise as ego and thereby mistake ourselves to be a person, a body and mind, the five she's that constitute what is called the body, even then, that we never leave, we are never unaware of that fundamental awareness I am. We just mistake it to be something other than what it actually is. Just as when we see a rope and mistake it to be a snake, even when we mistake it to be a snake, what we actually seeing is only a rope. Likewise, even when we mistake ourselves to be this body and mind, what we actually are aware of as I is only this fundamental awareness, but that is actually the infinite whole. We don't experience it as the infinite whole because we wrongly mistake ourselves to be this body and mind. So this first statement, nāṉeṉuñ poruḻ adu nāḻumē, that this is extremely significant. This is always the true import of the word I. And then he gives the reason, nāṉaṭṛa tūkkattum namadiṉmai nīkkattāl. This is a very this is a very, very deep and significant thing Bhagavan is saying here. That is, when he says, he describes sleep as being devoid of I, the I that is absent in sleep is the false adjunct mixed awareness, I am this body. It is not that there are two eyes, one eye goes absent in sleep. What is absent in sleep is the adjuncts, is the other limiting adjuncts. In the limiting adjuncts, we remain just as we actually are. So, but it is said that is when the limiting adjuncts are not there, we don't experience ourselves as ego, we experience ourselves just as I am. So in effect, ego is absent in sleep. That is, ego as ego is absent in sleep. What exists in sleep is only I am, which is the reality of ego, the reality underlying the appearance of ego. So though there's no ego in sleep, we are nevertheless clearly aware of our own existence. That's why he says, namadiṉmai nīkkattāl. Here he's referring only to our existence in sleep. That is, he's affirming here we do exist in sleep. But how do we know we exist in sleep? Because we're aware of our existence in sleep. That is, according to Bhagavan, existence and awareness are one of the same thing. We can, from the perspective of the reasoning intellect, arguments can be given from the perspective of existence, sat, or from the perspective of awareness, chit. But sat and chit are actually one and the same. So if we go deep into it, saying that we exist in sleep clearly implies that we're aware of our existence in sleep. The fact that we exist in sleep, according to Bhagavan, what exists in sleep is only I am, nothing other than I am. In this respect, Bhagavan's analysis of the three states actually goes deeper than what is often called the explanation of traditional Advaita. In fact, in Advaita, there are many different levels of explanation, but how it is generally explained is that in sleep, what remains is only ajnana, is only ignorance, along with the vāsānas. Right? Vāsānas are the seeds that give rise to ego. That's how it's usually explained. Bhagavan's analysis goes deeper. Firstly, that according to Bhagavan, there is absolutely no ignorance in sleep. Why? And there are also no vāsānas in sleep. Why? Because who is ignorant? Who is ignorant of its real nature? It is only ego. It's only when we rise as ego and are aware of ourselves as I am this, but we are thereby not aware of what we actually are. So ajnana doesn't exist independent of ego. So since ego is absent in sleep, ajnana is also absent in sleep. And the vāsānas are what? Vāsānas are our inclinations. Whose inclinations? Their ego's inclination. So in the absence of ego in sleep, there's no ajnana and there are no vāsānas. And therefore, the usual explanation, that is the most popular explanation, but in waking, that is the analysis of the three bodies that they give in most, that is the standard explanation in Advaita, but in waking state, we experience the stula sarira, the gross body as I. In dream, we experience the sukshma sarira, the subtle body as I. And in sleep, only the causal body remains. This analysis is not applicable in Bhagavan's teachings. That is, Bhagavan gives a deeper analysis. Firstly, he says waking, what we take to be waking is just a dream. There's absolutely no difference between waking and dream. So to say that in waking we experience gross body as I, and in dream we experience the subtle body as I, as Bhagavan often pointed out, while we are dreaming, the dream body seems to be just as gross, just as physical as our present body seems to be. So it's actually, and in both states, we are actually aware of all 5 sheaths. What are the 5 sheaths? The 5 sheaths are the gross body, the physical body, that's the annamaya kosha, the life, the pranamaya kosha, the mind, the manamaya kosha. Here, mind means the grosser functions of the mind, perception, memory, thinking, all the grosser functions of the mind. The intellect, the buddhi or vijnanamaya kosha, and what is called the anandamaya kosha. But Bhagavan says the anandamaya kosha is nothing but the cittam, the will. That is the will, or the anandamaya kosha, is the sum total of all our vāsānas. The vāsānas are the seeds that give rise to our likes, dislikes, desires, attachments, and so on. So all these collectively are called cittam, and are also called anandamaya kosha. So in both waking and dream, all these 5 sheaths we experience as I. And all these 5 sheaths, as Bhagavan says in verse 5 of nāṇaṭṭṛa, udul panchakosa uru. Whenever we experience a body as I, we always experience a gross physical body, and that gross, we never experience a dead body as I, so it's always a living body. So there's the body and the life. And we never experience a sleeping body as I. It's always a body that seems to be awake. So when we're awake, there's mind, intellect, and will, all are functioning. So all 5, whenever we experience a body as I, we experience all 5 sheaths. Sometimes people ask, what about out of the body experiences? Isn't that the state without the gross body? No, even out of the body experiences, we still have it may be a very subtle physical body, but it's still a physical body. Why? Because people who have out of the body experiences, for example, sometimes they say that during an operation or something, or when they're being resuscitated from a heart attack, they are often up near the ceiling in a room looking down, or different explanations are there. But whatever their perception of the world, they're perceiving from a location. If we have a location in the physical world, we have a physical form. It may be a subtle, intangible, invisible physical form, but it's still a physical form, because without a physical form, we couldn't have a physical location. So we always experience a gross body as I, and all the 5 sheaths we always experience as I, whenever we experience a body as I. In sleep, there is no ego. So there is none of these 5 sheaths are there. That is Bhagavan's analysis, which is deeper. And there's a good reason for Bhagavan's deeper analysis. Firstly, firstly, Bhagavan emphasized that what we take to be waking is just a dream. That helps us to understand the unreality of our present state. And also, not only is this there's a deeper implication. If all this is a dream, whatever we see in a dream doesn't exist independent of our perception of it. That is, perception and creation are not 2 different things. This is what is called drishti shrishti vada. Drishti means perception. Literally means seeing, but it implies perception. Perception, I mean, seeing, hearing, touching, tasting. So all perception we can take it as. Though it literally means seeing, it's not just referring to sight. It's referring to all forms of perception. So most explanations of the appearance of the world are what are called shrishti drishti vada. They take creation to come first, and then there's perception. That is, this world existed for so many thousands or millions or billions of years, whatever is according to different beliefs, and we were born into it. And because we're born into it, we now see it. We are now perceiving it. That is all scientific explanations, the vast majority of religious and philosophical explanations of the existence of the world assume that the world exists even when we don't perceive it. Bhagavan says this is an unjustifiable assumption. So according to Bhagavan, this world, any world that we perceive, any state in which we perceive a world is just a dream. So in dream, whatever world we perceive in a dream has absolutely no existence, doesn't exist except in our view of it. It's only in our view of the world, the dream world seems to exist. It has no existence independent of our perception of it. Likewise, this present world has no independent existence. So this is one reason for Bhagavan's analysis, but his analysis of sleep is particularly important, because supposing we are ready to accept that in sleep ignorance remains or vāsānas remain, then what evidence, if ignorance remains in sleep, what evidence do we have that we are anything other than ignorance? There are major schools of philosophy in India, but particularly I believe the Nyaya and the Vaiseshika schools of philosophy, they believe that the ajnana of sleep, the ignorance of sleep, is what we actually are, because when everything else is removed, what remains? Only that ignorance. So that is what that is our true nature, is only that ignorance. So how can you argue against that? If you accept that there's ignorance in sleep, there's no we have no reason for believing that they are wrong. If when everything else is removed, if ignorance alone is what remains, then and since we exist in sleep, we must be that ignorance. What we actually are must be that ignorance. But according to Bhagavan, no, sleep is not a state of ignorance. Why sleep is called a state of ignorance? Because in sleep, we are not aware of anything other than ourselves. Because we now take awareness of other things, awareness of this world and all this, both the external world and the internal world of our own thoughts and emotions and desires and so on, we take this this world, inner and outer world, our awareness of this, we take that to be awareness. So since there's no awareness of any of these things, of any phenomena, whether physical or mental, in sleep, it is said, oh, sleep is a state of ignorance. It's a state we're not aware of anything in sleep. True, we are not aware of anything in sleep, but we are aware. There's just that basic awareness, I am. I am is not an object of awareness. That is, what we actually are is always aware of itself as it is. The awareness I am is not an objective awareness, it's just of the fundamental awareness. The very nature of awareness is to be aware of itself as I am. That is, we cannot be aware without being aware that we are aware. And in order to be aware that we are aware, we must be aware that we exist. If you want to give an argument, but even if you give an argument, it's again complicating it. The fact is, existence is always, awareness is always aware of its own existence. That's the very nature of awareness. According to Bhagavan, in sleep, there is no ego, and therefore there's no ignorance, no vāsānas, nothing. There's no nāṇdamaya kosha or karana sarira, none of these things. There is only I am. And since I am alone exists in sleep, that is what we actually are. Otherwise, if you conceive that anything else exists in sleep, if you conceive that ignorance or nāṇdamaya kosha or whatever you call it, usually these things are identified and said to be one, then we can take that to be ourselves. We have no evidence that we're anything other than that. If we take sleep to be a state of ignorance, there is no evidence that we're anything other than that ignorance. But of course, according to Bhagavan, ignorance is not what we actually are. What we actually are is pure awareness, the fundamental awareness I am. Bhagavan's analysis of the three states is far deeper and far more practical than the more superficial analysis that is generally given in Advaita texts. There's a reason why that more superficial analysis is given in Advaita texts, because most people are unwilling to accept that this world is just a dream. So if you insist, no, this world is a dream, those people will go away rejecting Advaita philosophy. So more Advaita caters for people who are not yet ready to accept the complete non-existence of the world, or not ready to accept that the world has no existence apart from our perception of it. Advaita caters to them. Why? In order to gradually lead them towards the deeper truth as revealed by Bhagavan. So that is why many traditional Advaitic explanations imply that there is a difference between waking and dream. And though in many Advaitic texts, it is said that waking is just a dream, or almost said like that. I believe Gaudapada says so argues that in his Mandukya Karika. They say, no, that is just an analogy. Waking is like sleep in many respects, but it's not, sorry, waking is like dream in many respects, but it's not actually a dream. Whereas Bhagavan says, no, it is actually a dream. And why is it said that in sleep, ignorance remains, or causal body remains, or anandamaya kosha, or vāsānas, or whatever it is? Why is this said? Because people want explanations for everything. If there's nothing, if ego and its five sheaves and its ignorance are completely absent in sleep, then how does the ego rise again in waking? If you say, oh, everything remained there in seed form, and that seed form is what is called karana sarira, that gives you a nice explanation of why ego rises again. But if that is the cause for the rising of ego, that means the causal body exists independent of ego. But whose causal body is it? It's only ego's causal body. It's only ego that takes that, that identifies itself with all the five sheaves. So to say that any of the five sheaves exist independent of ego is just creating a confusion. So if that is the case, according to Bhagavan has said, as Bhagavan said, there's no ego, no world, I mean, no ajnana, no vāsānas in sleep, then how to explain the fact that ego comes out of sleep again? We shouldn't be looking for such explanations. Can we explain how ego first came into existence? No, we cannot. Likewise, we cannot explain how ego rises out of manolaya, or sleep, or any other state of manolaya. Why? Because for two reasons. Firstly, there is no cause of ego. As Bhagavan made clear, for example, in verse 26 of Uludunapadu, ego is the first cause. If ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. If ego doesn't exist, everything doesn't exist. That is, according to Bhagavan, ego alone is the cause for the appearance of everything else. Why? Because everything else appears only in the view of ego. So without ego, nothing else could appear to exist. So ego is the first cause. It's the cause of all causes. So there is no cause for ego. So if that is why it is said, Maya is said to be anadi, beginningless, or anivachaniya. It cannot be explained. Why? Bhagavan said it cannot be explained, and it doesn't have an origin because it doesn't actually exist. What is called Maya, Bhagavan said, is nothing but ego. So if we investigate this ego, we will find that there's no such thing at all. Since no such thing actually exists, there's no need to look for any explanation for it. So whenever people ask Bhagavan, why did ego rise, or how did ego rise? Bhagavan said, first find out whether it's risen. If you can find this ego, bring it to me, and then we can find out how it came into existence. In other words, asking why or how is the wrong question. If you want to ask about something, you first need to know what it is you're asking about. So we're asking about how this ego came into existence. First, investigate and see whether what ego is now, has it ever actually come into existence? If we investigate it, we will find there's no such thing. And since there's no such thing, it has never come into existence. So there's no need to explain how it came into existence. Since there's no need to explain how it first came into existence, there's no need to explain how it rose from sleep or any other state of manolaya. Now ego seems to exist. And because we seem to be ego, all these problems we face. So what is the solution? Investigate ourselves. If we investigate ourselves, we will see that we are just pure awareness, which is immutable and therefore has never risen as ego. So when we know that ego has never existed, nothing else has ever existed, there never was any problem. But so long as we rise as ego, there seems to be a problem. So the way to get rid of this problem is by investigation. So what Bhagavan says here, that is, the words here seem to be saying relatively little, but actually there's so much implication behind these words. When Bhagavan says, nāṇaṭṛa tūkkattum, that is sleep which is devoid of I, we need to think what is the significance of saying it's devoid of I? That implies devoid of ego. What is the implication of that? If it's devoid of ego, and if everything else depends for its seeming existence upon ego, it's devoid of everything. So there's no ajnana, there's no vāsānas, there's nothing in sleep. What exists in sleep is only that fundamental awareness I am. That is why, that is the true import of the word I. Because when he says in the first clause, nāṉeṇuñ poruḻ ḻāmadu nāḻumē, he's not just talking, though he said this is the true poruḻ can mean meaning or import or substance of that word. He's not just he's saying more than just what is the meaning of the word. He's saying what is we actually are. That is, the word I refers to whom? To ourselves. So the true import of that word is what we actually are. So what are we? We are actually that which is ever shining as I am I, that infinite whole which is ever shining as I am I. As I say, here he doesn't mention our awareness in sleep, though it's implied, because awareness is what we actually are, as he makes clear in later verses, particularly in verses 20, in verse 23, he makes it very clear. But exists, sat and chit are one and the same. That's uludu and uluvu. Uludu unavahum. He concludes. Uludu itself, uludu is what exists is awareness. That is uludu and unavu. Sat and chit are one and the same thing. And what is that? Sorry, the words have just slipped my mind. Unave nāmai ulam mundīpaṛa, he says, he concludes, that is, awareness alone exists as we. We are that awareness. So we are sat and we are chit. Though here in verse 22, he explicitly mentions existence, or rather the absence of non-existence, it implies awareness also. Regarding existence, the fact that we are not non-existent in sleep, there's a very deep philosophical implication here. That is, Bhagavan often used to say, what actually exists must always exist. Anything that seems to exist at one time and not at any other time doesn't actually exist, even when it seems to exist. There is a good reason for this. Actually, Bhagavan there is referring to a verse, the same idea that Bhagavan expressed is also expressed by Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. There's a very important verse, many of the verses of Bhagavad Gita, of course, are important, but particularly a verse with very deep implication is verse 16 of chapter 2. Bhagavan has translated it into Tamil as verse 9 of Bhagavad Gita Saram. I will read the meaning of a verse. I will tell you the meaning of a verse. That is, ilada tanaku. That is, for that which doesn't exist, irupu illai. That is, there is no existence for what doesn't exist. What doesn't exist never exists is the implication. So for what doesn't exist, there is no existence. Ulla tanaku ḻāmadu embadu illai. That is, for what exists, there is no what is called non-existent doesn't exist. Or there's no such. There's no non-existence. In other words, that is what doesn't exist never exists. What exists never ceases to exist. So what exists always exists. What doesn't always exist never exists, is the implication. I mean, it goes on. Illadu ulladu eṉnum irendin ilbu iduam kanda. For those who see that this is the nature of what exists and what doesn't exist, or those who see that this is the nature of these two, what exists and what doesn't exist, Meitane arindava. They see the reality. That is, if we know what is real, we will know that what exists always exists, and what doesn't always exist never exists. So that is a very deep implication. How can we understand that, or how can we relate that? What Krishna says here, and Bhagavan has translated in Tamil, how can we relate that to our present experience? Now it seems to us that this world exists. At least in waking, this world exists. In dream, some other world exists. So there are times when it seems to exist, but there are times when it doesn't seem to exist. And even if you think it exists independent of your perception of it, it hasn't always been as it is now. It's constantly changing. So according to the materialists, the modern scientists, for example, one among several explanations for the appearance of the world, what is nowadays the most popular explanation among the scientists, is the Big Bang theory. So many billions of years ago, there was Big Bang, and the universe expanded out of that Big Bang. So according to them, before that Big Bang, things were not as they are now. This universe as we know it didn't exist. And since that Big Bang, things have been constantly changing, evolving, and growing and expanding and everything. So the world is never constant. It's one thing at one time, it's another thing at another time. And at one time it didn't exist as we know it. So even the most staunch materialists, they agree that the world didn't always exist as it exists. So if it didn't exist as it always did, what does it actually exist now? That is, anything that doesn't always exist, does it exist when it seems to exist? This is a very deep metaphysical thing. That is, if something is intrinsic, it will always be the case. That is, if the world were intrinsically existent, it would always exist. It couldn't not exist. The fact that it exists at some time and not at another time means it is not intrinsically existent. We can understand this with an analogy. That is, existence is not a property, but to understand that only what always exists is intrinsically existent. We could use an analogy using a property. A simple analogy that is sometimes used is a hot potato. If a potato is hot, is heat an intrinsic property of the potato? No, it's not. That is, potatoes aren't always hot. So from where did the potato get its heat? Because the heat is not an intrinsic property of potato, it must have got its heat from something else, something other than itself. So the potato got its heat from hot water. So is the water intrinsically hot? No, the water got its heat from a hot pan. And is the pan intrinsically hot? No, because the pan isn't always hot. Just like the potato and the water, the pan is sometimes cold and sometimes hot. So the pan is not intrinsically hot. So from where did it get its heat? It got it from the fire. Is the fire intrinsically hot? Yes. Whenever there's a fire, it is hot. It's the nature of fire to be hot. So for fire, heat is an intrinsic property. For a pan and for water and for potato, heat is a borrowed property. It's not intrinsic, it has borrowed it from some other source. So anything that is not intrinsic must be borrowed from something other than that in which it is not intrinsic. So since the world doesn't always exist, it must borrow its existence from something else. That is, it's not intrinsically existent, so it must borrow its existence from something else. This is where Bhagavan's teachings come in. From where does the world borrow its existence? According to Bhagavan, it borrows its existence only from us as ego, that is. That is, it's only in the view of ego that any world seems to exist. Whether this world in our present state or a world in dream, it borrows its existence from ego, because it's only in the view of ego that it seems to exist. So all phenomena borrow their existence, all things that are seen borrow their existence from the seer. Everything that is perceived borrows its seeming existence from the perceiver, because it exists only in the view of the perceiver. So all phenomena borrow their existence from ego. So is ego intrinsically existent? No. If ego were intrinsically existent, it will always exist, but it doesn't exist in sleep. So ego is not intrinsically existent. So from where does ego borrow its existence? It borrows it from Satchit, from I am. This is what Bhagavan says in verse 24 of the Nāṇaṭṭha. He says, the body doesn't say I. There he's using that term metaphorically. That means the body is not aware of itself as I, because Jada Urul nāṇeṇuñ. The body is Jada, it's not non-aware, so it's not aware of itself as I. Satchit Undiyār. Satchit doesn't rise. But in between these two rises one thing called I as the extent of a body. So when he says in between, what does he mean by in between? Again, in between is a metaphorical term here. It's not literally in between the body and Satchit, as if these were two different things, because there can be not even the appearance of a body without Satchit, because Satchit means existence, awareness. So without Satchit, nothing could exist or even seem to exist. So when he says in between, he's again using it metaphorically. That is, ego is neither the body, because the body is not aware of itself as I, nor is it Satchit, because Satchit doesn't rise. It's a spurious entity, but borrows the properties of both, or not even to say properties. It borrows the properties of the body. It limits itself as a form, but we can't say it borrows the properties of Satchit, because Satchit is not a property, it is a substance. Satchit means existence, awareness. Existence and awareness are not properties, they are substance. So the ego borrows its substance from Satchit. That is, ego is the false awareness, I am this body. This body is a form. I am is the substance. The substance means it is the existence and the awareness. When we say I am, what do the words I am denote? Literally, I am is a statement of our existence. I exist. But it's also explicitly, it's a statement of our existence. Implicitly, it's a statement of our awareness, because only that which is aware can refer to itself as I. So awareness is implied in the word I. So when we say I exist, we say we exist because we're aware we exist. So our existence and our awareness are both implied in the term I am. So Sat Chit is always aware of itself as I am. So when the substance in ego is only that I am portion. So that from where is it borrowed that? I am doesn't belong to it, because in sleep, ego isn't aware of itself as I am because it doesn't exist in sleep. So it has borrowed that I am. It's borrowed its existence and its awareness from Sat Chit. So Sat Chit is inherently is intrinsically existent and intrinsically aware. Ego, though it now seems to exist and seems to be aware, it is not intrinsically existent or intrinsically aware. So what is real is only Sat Chit. So what actually exists is only Sat Chit, which is what Bhagavan says in this verse. This is always the true import of the term I. The Sat Chit is always the true import of the term I. And that is what Krishna means in that verse in Bhagavad Gita when he says, but for what exists, there is never any non-existence. That is, Bhagavan says, but why this is always why this is the true import of this word I, why this is the true significance, what I actually refers to at all times, because it never ceases to exist. It is what is intrinsically existent. So there's no non-existence for I. That's why Bhagavan says, because of the exclusion or the removal of the absence of our non-existence in sleep, because we are not non-existent in sleep, in other words, because we always exist, this is what we actually are. And when Krishna says, for what doesn't exist, there is never any existence. So these things, everything that seems to exist at one time and not at another time, doesn't actually exist, even when it seems to exist. This, as I say, this is something Bhagavan often used to say. So ego, though it seems to exist, and it's only because ego seems to exist that everything else seems to exist, but though it seems to exist, it doesn't actually exist. So this is there is so much deep implied meaning in this verse. That is, in every word in this verse, there's meaning. When he says sleep is devoid of I, that we have to think very, very deeply. What is the implication of that? As I say, I refers to ego. So if ego is absent in sleep, as he says in verse 26 of Ουλū, āhandē undāyin anetum. If ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. Āhandē indru anetum. If ego doesn't exist, everything doesn't exist. So since ego doesn't exist in sleep, everything doesn't exist in sleep. What exists in sleep is only the true import of the word I. That is Sat Chit. That is the fundamental awareness I am. So, as I say, there's so much deep meaning here. Oh, and I just wanted to refer to one other verse in this context, because he says, because of the absence of our non-existence in sleep, there's another verse in which Bhagavan talks about not ceasing to exist in sleep. In verse 23 of Ουλū, Bhagavan begins in a similar way to the way he begins verse 24. He begins by saying, nāṉeṉuñ iddeham nabiladu. This body does not say I. As I say here is used metaphorically to mean the body isn't aware of itself as I. And then in the next sentence he says, tūkkattum nāṉeṉuñ endru ārum nabiladu illai. Yarum nabil vadu illai. That is, no one's, or anyone does not say, or no one says, in sleep I do not exist. So what is the significance of these two sentences? since the body is not aware of itself as I, the body cannot be what we actually are. And since we do not cease, since we are clearly aware that we exist in sleep, in the absence of body, again, this is another argument why the body is not I. There are some philosophers, because philosophers are very good at philosophers can argue anything. They can argue black is white and white is black if they want to. So there are philosophers who say we don't exist in sleep, who will argue that. But what is not existing in sleep is only ego, because they identify themselves either with the mind or the body or ego. They say there's no I in sleep. Yes, Bhagavan also says there's no I in sleep, but the I that Bhagavan refers to as absent in sleep is ego. But we exist in sleep. That's why we are always clearly aware. When we wake up, we all say, I slept. How can we know that we slept? It's not because some other people told us, oh, we saw you sleeping for 8 hours or 6 hours or whatever. We don't need other people to tell us we slept. If there was nobody about, if we were all on our own and we fell asleep and woke up, we would clearly know, yes, I was asleep. We can distinguish 3 states. There's our present state, which we take to be waking. There's other states which we now recognize were just dreams. But there's also a third state. In both waking and dream, we're aware of ourselves as a body and we're aware of phenomena. But there's a third state in which we're not aware of anything. That means we're not aware of anything is the operative word. That is, there's no object of awareness. There's nothing of which we are aware, but we are still aware I am. Because I am is not an object of our awareness. The basic awareness, I exist, it remains even in sleep. That is why when we wake up, we say, I slept. If we didn't exist in sleep, then it wasn't I who slept, it was somebody else that slept. But we always say, I slept, because we are clearly aware of our existence in sleep. So I think I've probably explained enough about this for now. So if anyone has any questions they would like to ask.
I think you answered all the questions already. There's nothing left. I was writing down the questions and you kept on answering it, you know.
Okay. I probably answered a lot of questions that nobody would even have thought of asking.
So I have a question.
Yes.
Ram, do you want to ask something?
Yes, the question I want to ask is, having known this reality, somehow, Michael, not somehow, everyone is in the same boat. We are pulled towards this materialism, right? And you took the plunge of staying there with Bhagavan for 20 years, and day in and day out, I guess when you did that, you didn't have any other avocation other than hunting the eye, I suppose. So the thing is, for me, the desperateness is growing, which is the being in the world and thinking about God. I don't think that works for me. So the thing is, I need to have that as a living reality every moment of my life. Any advice there?
It is always a living reality. Even when you think you're involved in the world, who is involved in the world? It's I. So I is always there. Oh, I'm so much involved in worldly activities. How am I going to be saved? Even when we're involved in worldly activities, I is there. Bhagavan says, all you need to do is hold on to I. If you hold on to I, you thereby renounce everything else. So you don't have to go off to the Himalayas and sit in a cave. You don't have to leave your family. You don't have to change the color of the clothes you wear. You don't have to take any diksha or have any or take a new name or anything. These are just outward changes. The change that is required is an inward change. Now we are allowing our attention to go outwards. Now we have so much taste for going outwards, so much inclination to go outwards. In other words, we have so much vāsānas, with so much inclination to attend to other things. Now we have to change that inclination. The inclination of our mind is to go out. Now we've got to reverse that inclination. How can we reverse that inclination? Bhagavan says only by practice. We have to slowly and persistently, we have to be trying to turn our attention back within. So over crores of janmas, we have cultivated such strong Vishaya vāsānas. Now we have to undo those Vishaya vāsānas and cultivate the opposite vāsana, which is Sat vāsana. Vishaya vāsana means inclination towards Vishayas. In other words, the inclination to attend to and to experience Vishayas. Vishayas means phenomena, things other than ourselves. Sat vāsana means the inclination just to be, to know and to be what we actually are. How can we cultivate that Sat vāsana? Only by practice of turning our attention within. The more we turn our attention within, the more we will strengthen the Sat vāsana and weaken the Vishaya vāsanas. So there is no shortcut, and there's no all these things that we think will be an aid. Supposing you renounce everything and you take sannyasa diksha and you go off to the Himalayas or to Arunachal or somewhere, and you sit in a cave and you want to meditate. The outward appearance has changed. You may have shaven your head or grown a beard or something, and you're wearing different color clothes. This is all outward appearance. This is all Vaishya. Inwardly, the mind remains the same. We cannot renounce the world just by taking sannyasa diksha. The renunciation has to be inward. So at each moment, we have a choice. Do we allow our mind to be carried away by our Vishaya vāsanas? Do we allow our mind to go outwards, or do we turn it back within? Every moment we choose, even for a small moment, to turn towards ourselves, we are thereby strengthening the Sat vāsana and weakening the Vishaya vāsanas. This is the only way. That's why Bhagavan wasn't opposed to anyone taking sannyasa, because according to Bhagavan, all this is according to prarabdha. If it's your prarabdha to be married, you'll be married. If it's your prarabdha to be a sannyasi, you'll be a sannyasi. All these are according to prarabdha. But you can be, Bhagavan often said, the householder who doesn't think I am a householder is a better sannyasi than the sannyasi who thinks I am a sannyasi. So for Bhagavan, these outward things are unimportant. If it is good for you to live a life of an outward life of sannyasa, that will be given according to your prarabdha. If the prarabdha has been given to you to get married, to have a wife and children and responsibilities and worldly worries and all these things, that is what is best for you. But even Bhagavan said, prarabdha affects only the outward going mind. Only if we allow our mind to follow our Vishaya vāsanas, we're affected by the prarabdha. If we don't follow the Vishaya vāsanas, if we instead turn back within, the prarabdha cannot touch us. The prarabdha touches us only when we come out and thereby identify ourselves as I am Michael or I am Ramji or whoever. The problems are because we identify this person as I. How can we separate ourselves from this person? How can we renounce this person? Only by renouncing ego, which is the I that says I am this person. How do we renounce ego? Ego is a false awareness of ourselves. So only by correct awareness of ourselves can we renounce it. So it's only by turning our attention back within that we can separate ourselves, not only from the person we take ourselves to be, but also from the ego who takes itself to be that person.
So the key is to பழக இப்படி பழக மனத்திற்கு தன் பிறப்பிடத்தில் தங்கி நிற்கும் சக்தி அதிகரிக்கின்றது.
Yes. So without practice, that is, Bhagavan always emphasized practice. And if we attend to Bhagavan's teachings carefully, whatever Bhagavan has taught us, it all has practical implications. Bhagavan, I was just saying, I can't remember, someone I was talking to a few days ago, I just say, some people say, oh, I'm not interested in all this theory, I only want to practice. And they think, they dismiss a lot of Bhagavan teaching because they take it all to be theory. All this thing about the world being a dream and all this and what's in Upadēśa, so much theory. I'm not interested in this theory. I'm only interested in practice. But every word in Upadēśa, every word in nāṇa, every word in Arunachal Stuti Panchakam, all has practical implications. Bhagavan hasn't come just to teach a nice philosophy. Bhagavan came to teach us how to free. We've got ourselves in a big mess. We want to get ourselves out of this mess. Bhagavan has come to teach us how to get out of this mess. So all that Bhagavan teaches us is not for the mere sake of philosophy or nice ideas to think about. We need to understand the practical implication of everything that Bhagavan has taught us, and we need to put it into practice. Even understanding the practical implication is not sufficient if we don't put it into practice. We have to apply it in our life. At every moment in our life, this has to be applied. That is, self-investigation and self-surrender is not just for times when we sit for meditation, 20 minutes morning and evening, or whatever we may do. At every moment in our life, we need to be trying to surrender and to investigate what we actually are. There, one of us, that is our whole life should be the whole aim of our whole life. It doesn't matter if the body, mind, and speech are engaged in outward activity. This body, mind, and speech are not I. It's only because we take, I am this mind, I am this body, I am this speech. So I have so many worries about how to pay the bills, how to pay the taxes, how to help my children get into university, or how to pay their fees, or how to arrange for marriage, or whatever. We may have worries about so many things. Those worries belong to that person. Are we that person? We need to separate ourselves from this person. So long as we are united with this person, we are ego. When we separate ourselves from this person, ego disappears. How do we separate ourselves from this person? By clinging only to I am. The problem is, what is bondage? Bondage is not, the world hasn't come and caught us. The body hasn't come and caught us. We catch hold of this body and say, I am this body. And we experience problems and we say, oh, I'm in bondage. If you're in, what is the solution? Your bondage is that you are holding on to all this. Let go of it and you're free. I don't say it's easy letting go, because we do have strong Vishaya vāsānas. So we are not yet willing to let go. That is the problem. So how to cultivate that willingness to let go? Only by practice, practice, practice. That what Kumar referred to, for those who aren't aware of the Tamil.
Yes, please, yeah.
In the 6th paragraph of nāṇa, Bhagavan says, what does it matter however many thoughts arise? As and when any thought arises, but by the way, when Bhagavan says any thought arises, he's not just talking about, people think it means the mental chatter. He's not just talking about mental chatter. According to Bhagavan, he said in the 4th paragraph of nāṇa, the world is nothing but thoughts. The whole world is nothing but thought, because this is all a dream. So everything other than the fundamental awareness I am is a thought. So whatever we may be aware of other than ourselves, it doesn't matter how many things appear. As and when anything appears, to whom does it, if we keenly investigate, to whom does it appear? If we vigilantly, he said, Jagrataya, vigilantly investigate, to whom does it appear? Enukendru tondrum. It will appear to me. That will be clear. It appears only to me. All this appears only to me. So who am I? If we investigate who am I, he then says, if we investigate who am I, what he means is if we hold on to that I, having, that is, the question to whom turns our attention back towards ourselves. Not that it's necessary to ask the question, but the question can be that is this question Bhagavan asked, to whom is an extremely powerful question. Whatever appears, to whom does it appear? It appears only to me. It's also a very powerful question, that is for philosophy, when we're trying to understand Bhagavan's teachings. Whatever appears, to whom does it appear? Like people have problems about how can Bhagavan say the world doesn't exist for Vijnani? Because we see Bhagavan acting in the world and he's answering questions and everything. To who Bhagavan says, to whom does it appear? But Vijnani is aware of. But Vijnani is a body, and Vijnani is aware of the world. It is only to you. So investigate yourself. So we can. This is a very, very powerful question Bhagavan asked. To whom? Because this points directly back at ourselves. So to whom does all this appear? To me. If we then investigate who am I, if we hold on to that awareness, that fundamental awareness I am, that's what he means by if one investigates who am I, the mind will return to its pirappidam, its birthplace, and the thought which rose will subside. That is, the mind rises by attending to, but so long as we attend to other things, we are rising and nourishing the ego. Urupatri undam, urupatri nikkum. Grasping form, it comes into existence. Grasping form, it stands. Urupatri undu mika ongam. Grasping and feeding forms, it flourishes. So this is the nature of ego. So long as we are attending to other things, we are feeding and nourishing ego. But if we turn back within and try to hold on to I, ego thereby subsides. Heidinalotum pidicum. It's sought, it takes flight. So this is the nature of ego. If we turn our attention back within, we will thereby bring about the subsidence of ego. Now I can't remember what I was, where I had begun from.
So I think you're quoting those sentences as a prelude to coming to the next sentence, which is palaha palaha.
Yes. So if we investigate who am I, the mind will return to its birthplace. That means if we hold on to I am, ego will thereby subside. And the thought which had risen will also subside. Why will the thought which had risen subside? Because thoughts cannot arise without our attending to them. If we don't attend to them, they disappear. This whole world is just a thought. It seems to exist so long as we look at it, so long as we attend to it. If we don't attend to it, when we're at night time, when we're too tired to continue in this waking state, we cease attending to this world, it disappears. It appears only when we attend to it. So if we attend to I, everything else will disappear. If we hold on firmly to I, everything else will disappear. In practice, when we are practicing now, everything doesn't disappear when we hold on to I, because we are not turning the full 180 degrees. We're only turning partially. We're to some extent holding on to I, but we're not fully letting go of other things. That's why they don't disappear. But Bhagavan says, that's why Bhagavan says in the next sentence, by practicing, and when one practices thus, manatuku, to the mind, tan pirapidiv till tangi nikkam shakti, the power to abide in its birthplace, in its source, adhikari kindra, will increase. That is, we will develop the power to remain as we actually are by this persistent practice. Doesn't matter however many times our mind comes outwards, pull it back within. The mind comes outwards as soon as the mind comes outwards, other things appear. To whom do they appear? To me. Turn back again. That we should be constantly turning away from what is seen, back to the seer. Who is the one who's perceiving all this? To whom does all this appear?
Right.
And over when we do that paraya practice, it becomes, I suppose, easier at some point.
Not necessarily. Our strength does increase, but Bhagavan gives another analogy in Nāṇa, in the 11th paragraph. He says, so long as their enemy within the fortress, they will keep on coming out. That is, in the context that is in the 10th and 11th paragraph, Bhagavan is talking about Vishaya Vāsānas. So in that context, it's clear what he means by the enemies in the fortress is Vishaya Vāsānas. The fortress that we're trying to capture is our own heart. Inside our heart, these Vishaya Vāsānas are there. If you're besieging a fortress, the enemy inside the fortress, if they've got a large supply of food and water, they need not come out. But the Vāsānas are not like that. They've got no food and water in their fortress. In order to get food and water, they need to come out. What is the water that nourishes and sustains Vishaya Vāsānas? Our attention. So they keep on coming out for our attention. If we attend to them, we're giving them a free pass. But if we, instead of attending to them, if we turn our attention back within, we are thereby depriving them of the attention they're seeking, and they are killed. So Bhagavan says, so long as their enemies in the fortress, they will continue coming out. As and when they come, if one continues cutting them down, eventually the fortress will be captured. So if we want to capture the fortress, we need to kill the Vishaya Vāsānas. How do we kill the Vishaya Vāsānas? Not by allowing our mind to go after them, by turning our mind back within. So the reason I said this analogy, this is a very nice analogy, because what is actually happening is there's a fight going on within us, within our own will. But we have between desire and love, between our attachment to the world and bhakti. That is, or between satvasana and Vishaya Vāsānas. We've got an inclination to go within, but we've also got inclination to go out. So do we yield to the outward going inclination and perpetuate our problem, or do we nourish and sustain this satvasana by going within? So this battle is going on. So as we, in this battle, we may hope, but as we progress, things are going to get easier. It may seem that should be the case, but it's not always the case. The reason is, supposing a tiger is being hunted, and it's been wounded, and it's been cornered. Is that tiger meekly going to lie down and allow itself to be killed? No, it's going to fight. Though it's very much weakened, it's going to fight back very, very ferociously, very fiercely. It will fight back because it's fighting for its very life. So as the Vāsānas get weaker, they will fight even more because they're desperate. That is, the enemies in the fortress, they're being deprived of food and water. So the more you cut them down as they come, the longer they'll be without food and water, and the more desperate they'll be to come out and get food and water. So they'll come out fighting very fiercely. How do they fight? By trying to catch our attention and drag our attention outward. If we allow our attention to follow them, they are winning over us. And they're getting the nourishment they require, and they can go back into the fortress for a little while longer and before popping out again. So it is a fight that's going on. Bhagavan, in one verse in Guruvachakavai, Bhagavan said, in the Puranas, there's stories of the Devasudha Yuddha, the warfare between the Devas and the Asuras. Bhagavan said, this is nothing but the fight that is going on in our own heart, between our satvasana and all the Vishaya Vāsānas. In that verse of Guruvachakavai, it's not stated so explicitly. He doesn't actually mention the Vāsānas there. That is the implication. And that Murugan recorded what Bhagavan said, but often Murugan recorded it in a very brief form. When Bhagavan explained this, he often used to say, it's a constant battle going on within our own will between the Vishaya Vāsānas and the Satvasana. And this is the storm that Bhagavan refers to in Aksharamlai. Bhagavan says, Mihamal Nilamal Makatrale Kalum Ahamal Kartaralarunachala. That is verse 79 of Aksharamlai. Mihamal Nilamal Mākā trale kalam. That is, so that I kalam ahama kātaro. That is, protect me so that I should not be like a ship tossing in a great storm without a helmsman. That is, we are in the midst of a great storm, the storm of our vāsānas. We need a helmsman. That helmsman is Bhagavan. He alone can protect us. But in order to be protected by him, we need to cling to him. He is always shining in our heart as eye. So if we want that helmsman to protect us, we need to cling to him. We need to take refuge at his feet, hold his feet, and then the storm of our vāsānas will not affect us. When we let go of his feet, then we are carried away by the storm. So we need to be holding on to him. So he's always there to protect us. But we need to do our little bit of turning within and holding on to his feet. His feet is what is always shining in our heart as eye.
So coming back to Ram's question, Michael. So he asked, with practice, does it get easier or difficult? And then you answer that appropriately. But let me reframe it. Rather than look at it as it getting easier or difficult, is it fair to say with practice, the love to attend to self increases?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thanks, Kumar. Actually,
because the love is increasing,
yeah,
the Vishaya Vāsānas are becoming more and more desperate.
Right.
Because they're losing their strength. They're aware they're becoming weaker and weaker.
Oh, they're dying. They're getting desperate. Thank you, Michael.
That is why in all the if you read the verse of Manickavasagar or Morgana or Sadhu Om or Bhagavan's verses, that Bhagavan's Arunachal Panchakam, you can see there, they consider themselves the worst of the worst. Why is that? They are in a much purer state than we are, but because of the purity of their mind, they're able to see even the slightest impurity. That is, if you've got a dirty cloth and there's a stain on it, you hardly notice the stain because the whole thing is stained. But when you begin to clean the cloth, the more deep-rooted stain, the more deeply embedded stains become clearer and clearer.
Yeah.
Or another analogy Sadhu Om used to give, in a crescent moon, you don't see any craters. Even in a half moon, you can begin to see the craters very vaguely. It's only in a full moon that you see the craters very clearly. So the purer the mind becomes, the more clearly we are able to see the impurities.
That makes sense. That's
why when Bhagavan says, I'm worse than a dog, he literally means it. That is actually the experience of a devotee, of a highly mature devotee, will really feel himself to be the worst of the worst.
Wow. Now I think there is a follow-up question, I guess, on the points that you just discussed from Shohan. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Kumar. Thank you, Michael. Namaste.
Okay.
So my question is, so attending to other things, grasping on forms, the ego rises and flourishes, right?
Yes.
What about the egos of other people who are demanding our attention?
In whose view do those other people exist? To whom do they appear?
To my ego.
Who are you? Is it to you or to your ego that they appear?
To my ego, right? We are all different because of our egos.
But what I'm saying is, we say my ego as if ego was something other than ourselves. That is, we are now ego. That is, in effect, we are ego. That is, that which is aware of all this is ego. Ego is, they're not two things, and that I's ego, there is only one thing, that is the I, but it is now aware of all this, that is ego. Now, as ego, we are aware of ourselves as I am this person. Because ego mistakes itself to be a person, it mistakes every person to be an ego. But according to Bhagavan, there is only one ego. Who is that one ego? You are that. That is the one who is seeing all this. In a dream, you may feel, oh, these other people are so egotistical, they're disturbing me so much. But when you wake up, you can't put the blame for your disturbance on those other people. It was all your own creation.
So the more we are able to attend to our true selves, would it be the case that it would seem that other people's egos are expecting less of our attention? Or what I'm saying is, I'm saying in order to kill my ego, will other people's ego also disappear who have a view of my ego that they want to keep alive as well? It's not only my ego. Other people see my ego and they want to grasp onto that as well. They want to keep that alive very much.
In a dream, you see many people, and those people, you assume they are seeing the world. You assume they are egos, and they may even behave egotistically. But those other people exist only in your view. According to Bhagavan, there is only one ego. So don't worry about other people's egos. The other people exist only so long as you attend to them. So long as that is the world is whatever reality the world seems to have is reality we have given to the world. The world has no reality of its own. We give reality to the world. So long as we attend to the world, it seems very real. So the only solution was, there is no problem outside. The problem all lies within us. That is, the world may give us so much trouble, so long as we attend to it. But the fault lies with us for attending to it. So we need to, what we are trying to do is to attend to ourselves and thereby withdraw our attention from other things. So let us not be concerned about other people, about their egos or their behavior. It doesn't matter. If we have to, in our life, if we have to face people with very strong egos or people who make big demands on us, like sometimes family members may make demands on us, or there may be so many people who seem to be making demands on us. Those people exist only in our view. Only when we allow our attention to go outwards do the demands they make on us disturb us. Our aim is to go within. Whatever that is, people may make demands on us. They may expect us to do things. Whatever this body and mind are destined to do, they will be made to do. So we need not even worry about, oh, these people are making demands on my time, so I'm not able to. Let this body and mind do whatever actions they're destined to do. Our only aim is to turn within. So the more we turn within, the less we will be concerned about other people. If we're concerned about other people, it is because of our Vishaya, because we are yielding to our Vishaya vāsānas. Don't yield to the Vishaya vāsānas and other people won't disturb you at all. Let them make any amount of demands on you. Who are they making demands on? They're making demands on the person you seem to be, but you are not that person. You are trying to investigate who you actually are. You're trying to separate yourself from that person. So, and whatever happens to us, to this person we seem to be, is according to pravṛtti. And what is called pravṛtti is just another way of saying Bhagavan's will, because Bhagavan has selected this pravṛtti for our own good. So whatever happens to us, whatever troubles we receive from other people, it's all no other person can give us any trouble. It is Bhagavan who is giving us that trouble in order to strengthen our liking to go back within. Does that adequately answer your question, or is that still not satisfactory?
Yes, that answers a lot. Thank you, Michael. The thing is, the other thing is the Vishaya Vāsānas on other things. They actually, the other things are actually not as important as other people. Our love for other people, and you know,
but
there's
anything other than ourselves is a Vishaya. Even the other people are Vishayas. So yes. We all have strong desires and attachments, and a lot of our desires and attachments are not just about material things. It's about relationships, about those who are dear to us. When we turn within, it may seem that we are turning our back on those who are dear to us, but we are not actually, because those others are nothing but ourselves. So if we know what we actually are, that is Bhagavan often uses, when people ask, Bhagavan, how can I help the world? Bhagavan said, the greatest good you can do to the world is to know yourself. Because now the world seems to be something other than us. All our near and dear friends and relatives and so on, they seem to be something other than us. So we have desire and attachment. But if we know what we actually are is Pundram, the infinite whole, the Purna. So can there be anything other than that? No. So by knowing what we actually are, we will know the truth, we will know the reality of everything, and we'll be one with the reality of everything. So now our love for those who are near and dear to us is only a partial love. That is, we may love them, but we love ourselves more. We love them because they are making us happy, because they're kind to us, and they seem to enrich our lives. But it is because of the benefit we derive that we love them. So if we know what we actually are, then we will truly love them. We will love them as ourselves, as Bhagavan loved all of us, as Bhagavan loves all of us, not loved, always loves all of us. Because why does Bhagavan love us all? Why does he? Bhagavan wasn't partial to good people or anything. He was equally loving to the bad people as to the good people. Why? Because he didn't see people as people. He didn't see good or bad. He saw only himself. So he loves all of us as himself, because he sees all of us as himself. In other words, he sees nothing but himself.
So, Michael, so this is the last question. I just didn't want to get technical here, but you did explain from ego, the will or cittam arises, and from that sprouts the vāsānas. In that concept of the pravṛtti elements and nivritti elements, can you put this thing together and explain, please?
That is, there is no will apart from vāsānas. Vāsānas are the seed form of all our likes, dislikes, desires, attachments, fears, and so on. Basically, Bhagavan generally talked about just two types of vāsānas. In some contexts, he talked about other vāsānas, but the main two types of vāsānas Bhagavan was concerned about are Vishaya Vāsānas and Sat Vāsana. When we yield ourselves to our Vishaya Vāsānas, in other words, when we allow our mind to be drawn outwards by our Vishaya Vāsānas, that is pravṛtti. When we instead of yielding to the Vishaya Vāsānas, we follow the Sat Vāsana, that is nivritti. So we can call the Vishaya Vāsanas the pravṛtti Vāsanas and the Sat Vāsanas the nivritti Vāsana. Pravṛtti means rising and going outwards, going forwards. Nivritti means going back and just being as we actually are.
And both pravṛtti or vāsānas and nivritti or sattvasana together constitute cittam or will.
Yes, the totality of all
Totality of all vāsānas.
Yeah, all vāsānas.
Okay.
That is bhakti. Bhakti is a part of a will. Bhakti means love. So
Right.
it's very much a part of a will.
Okay. Thank you, Michael. Is there any other questions?
One question,
Okay.
Michael. In the previous question that you answered for Shoham, I think you called what Vishaya, all the externalities, Vishayas. But can the other term that can be used for Vishaya be thought? In my own mind, what I put a mathematical equation, which is thought equal to ego equal to world. If I don't have thoughts, or a thought actually, then there is no ego, and then there is no world. Is that a true statement there?
It is true, but the thing is, the ego is the first thought. It's the thought I. But though ego is a thought, it is a thought unlike all other thoughts, because all other thoughts are jada. Ego is the only thought that is endowed with awareness. Other thoughts are not aware of their own existence or of the existence of anything else. They're not aware of anything. Whereas it's ego, it's only in the view of ego that other thoughts seem to exist. So no other thought could exist without ego. That's why Bhagavan always emphasized this is the root thought. All other thoughts are vishayas, as you say. Ego is not a vishaya. Ego is that which is ego is the vishayas means objects. Ego is never an object. Ego is the subject. Ego is the perceiver. Ego identifies itself with objects. That is, this body, the five sheaths are all objects. That is, even the subtlest of the five sheaths, which the anandamaya kosha or will, consists of what? It consists of vāsānas. Those vāsānas, though it is the nature of ego to have Vishaya Vāsanas, because it's got that inclination to go outwards, the Vishaya Vāsanas are something other than ego, because ego can shed its Vishaya Vāsanas and develop Sat Vāsana instead. So the ego is not its will. Ego is what has the will. The ego is what is inclined, not the inclinations themselves. So that we need to separate ego from all these panchakosha, because the panchakoshas are all things of which we are aware, whereas ego is that which is aware of it. That's why Bhagavan calls ego a formless phantom. It's got absolutely no form of its own. That's why we can never see ego as an object. Does that mean we can't see ego? No, we can. But if we see ego, the more we look at ego, the more it dissolves back into its source. Because when we're looking at ego, we are thereby shedding the upadis, the adjuncts, and when we attend to ego, we're trying to attend to I am. Not the jada portion of the chit jada granthi, only the chit portion, the I am. So the more we hold on to I am, the more the upadis slip off. So that is the dissolution of ego. And if we hold on to I am firmly enough, so if we turn the full 180 degrees, that is, we thereby all the upadis will slip off, because we're no longer aware of them. We're aware only of ourselves when we turn 180 degrees. So ego will be dissolved and eradicated. That is just one moment we have to turn the full 180 degrees, and ego is thereby dissolved. And what remains is pure awareness, which is what ego always was. There never was an ego. There was only pure awareness. But it's just like, so long as you mistake a rope to be a snake, the snake seems to exist. If you want to get rid of that snake, the only way to actually kill that snake is to look at it very carefully. If you look at it very carefully, as soon as you look at it carefully enough to recognize what it is, as soon as you recognize, oh, it's only a rope, the ego is thereby, the snake is thereby obliterated. Not only do you know it is not a snake, you know it never was a snake. There never was a snake there at all. Likewise, but when we turn a full 180 degrees and see ourselves just as pure awareness, when we recognize ourselves as pure awareness, we will know we were always that. That is this verse. This verse of Upadēśa Undiyār we've been doing today. Nāṉeṉuñ poruḻ adu nāḻumē, nāṉaṭṛa tūkkattum mundīpaṛa, namadiṉmai nīkkattā. That is what we always are. We are always only the rope. We are never the snake. But so long as we don't look at ourselves carefully enough, so long as we're more interested in looking at other things than in looking at ourselves, we seem to be the snake, and so we get ourselves into all this trouble. The snake is ego, the rope is our real nature, pure awareness.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Michael. So with that, we'll conclude today's session. That was a really good explanation of verse 21. And next month, we will be looking at verse 22.
It's amazing how much, that is when we read Bhagavan's verses, it's not just the, when we first read them, we see the meaning. But what is important in Bhagavan's verses is not just the meaning, it's the implication. And that implication reveals it to itself to us as we go deeper in the practice. And as we think more and more about Bhagavan's verses and the connections between what he expresses here, what he expresses there, that all these are connected. Bhagavan's teachings are a simple, coherent whole. So every verse has connections elsewhere. So the more we see these connections, the more we're able to recognize the implications here. So these verses become more meaningful, more significant as we go deeper in the practice.
Thanks for pointing that out.
Now I explain this verse in this way, but if I were to explain it in 10 years' time, my explanation, I may be able to bring out so much more implication, but now I may not be seeing.
Deeper and deeper insight, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Somebody else questioning, no?
Yeah, and this is Stephen.
And Stephen, go, yeah.
Yeah, the practice is in the rereading. Like Michael said, 10 years from now, he's not going to be able to repeat it exactly as we just heard it today. And I won't be listening to it in the same manner.
Exactly. That's more important. My explanation may change. It's your understanding that's important.
Right. And so that's the value of being able to view this again, because when I go to view it again, because there's parts of it that just went by me so fast, and I got something, and rereading it or listening to it again, I'll be able to get a deeper understanding, because like when one is listening to a comedian and they're so funny and you start laughing, you miss the next two jokes.
Yeah. This is why we can imbibe the import of Bhagavan's verses only gradually. But what gives us the clarity to see deeper into the meaning of the verses, that clarity comes only from within. So we cannot master Bhagavan's teaching just by studying them, just by going on reading them again and again and thinking about them. Practice is absolutely important, because when we are practicing, when we are turning our attention back within, we are turning our attention back to the original light, the source of all light. That is the light of pure awareness. So by being self-attentive, we are, so to speak, bathing ourselves in clarity. So the more we put this into the Bhagavan teachings into practice, the more depth of meaning we will see in his verses.
Thank you.
So practice, we should always remember with Bhagavan, what is most important is practice, practice, practice. But the greatest aid to practice is studying and thinking about Bhagavan's teachings. That is, it's called, studying his teaching is called Sravana. That literally means hearing, but it has a broader meaning than just hearing, Sravana. Thinking deeply about his teachings is manana. Putting them into practice is nididhyasana. These three should be going on all the time, because our practice is supported by our reading. That is, the more we read these things, the more they encourage us to put it into practice. And the more clues, the more we put into practice and come back and read them, the more depth of meaning we're able to see. So it's giving us greater and greater clarity on what the actual practice is. So these three, it's an iterative process. Sravana, manana, nididhyasana. It's not that you first do Sravana, then when you finish Sravana, then you begin to do manana. When you finish your manana, you do nididhyasana. It's not like that. It's a constant thing. It's a constant iteration. The more we practice, the more meaning we're able to see in the verses. The more meaning we're able to see in it, it enables us to go deeper in our practice and thereby to see more in the verses. Of course, merely understanding Bhagavan's verses and Bhagavan's teaching is not, the point is, Bhagavan is intent on one thing, but we should know one thing. That is, who am I? That is our aim. But these verses are, all of Bhagavan's words are very, very great aid. They encourage us and they give us clarity of depth of understanding to go, and they help us in so many ways to go deeper and deeper within.
It's a good point. Thank you, Michael. And I think, and reading original works of Bhagavan also helps, get that understanding, even.
Yes. More than any other source, Bhagavan's own words, because that is these Arunachya Panchakam, Upadēśa Undiyār, that's Upadēśa Undiyār, and other small works, and Nana. These are the heart of Bhagavan's teachings, and these we can rely on. Every word here is Bhagavan's own words. So we can. Other books, if we read talks and day by day, there are problems. Firstly, there's a problem that Bhagavan often had to dilute his teachings. When people weren't ready to grasp or weren't ready to accept his deeper teachings, he'd have to give more superficial explanations. And also, Bhagavan responded to the questions. So the questions often weren't so relevant to his teaching. He would always try to bring people back to the main point, which is, who am I? But if people weren't ready, he would help people, everyone at their own level. That's one thing. But another problem with all these books, these were recorded by people who didn't have such a deep understanding of Bhagavan's teachings. So they recorded what they understood. Firstly, what they understood is what made an impression upon their mind. And then what they recollected of what they understood, they later wrote it down. So it's far removed from, and Bhagavan spoke in Tamil and they recorded in English. So it's far removed from Bhagavan's own original word. We can see glimmers of Bhagavan's teachings if we read talks, but we don't see with the full clarity and we can't rely on every word we read there.
So just those which are supportive, we can take it, right?
Yes,
those which are supportive,
yes.
those which are supportive
many
to
nice
the word.
ideas in such
Right.
books. There are many things we can take, but we should take it all with a pinch of salt and read with discrimination. But if we want to understand what is the heart of Bhagavan's teaching, what are the core principles of Bhagavan's teachings, then his original writings are where we can find all the core principles. And among all his original writings, that is, for understanding the very core principles, 3 texts, Nāṇa, Ulludunapti, and Upadēśa Undiyār. These are the 3 texts in which Bhagavan has systematically presented the core principles of his teachings. Of course, you find the same principles there throughout, in Arunachasthuti Panchakam in so many places. And Arunachasthuti Panchakam had the added, the Arunachasthuti Panchakam is a very practical guide, because it's actually whatever difficulties we face along the way, that we can understand a lot from Arunachasthuti Panchakam, but from the basic principles of Bhagavan teaching, these three texts, Nāṇa, Uludunaptu, Upadēśa Undiyār. If we grasp what Bhagavan is saying in these three texts, then we've got a solid foundation.
Yeah. Ramana Prasthanatraya.
Yes.
The triple canon of Bhagavan Ramana.
Yes.
Thank you, Michael. With that, we'll conclude today's session and chat with Michael again next month. Namaskar.
Namaskar.
Michael, you should come to US one of these days. We will sponsor the trip.
Where am I now? I've come there.
Yeah, you're right. I'm ignorant.
Nowadays, physical travel isn't necessary, because we have all this, we have cities. I am here and I'm in two places at one time. I'm in London, I'm in Houston.
Exactly.
So we all, nowadays, we all have cities.
Yep.
So without doing any yoga, we can get all these cities.
And in Canada too.
Yes, exactly.
Thanks, Michael.
Right,
What you are giving us will take your karma for the rest of your lifetimes, because this is such an upliftment for all of us. Thank you so much.
Well, it's not my doing, it's Bhagavan's doing. If I think I am doing, then it will be imperfect. To the extent to which I am able to remove this I, then Bhagavan will, then it's truly reflecting what Bhagavan is saying.
Right. So Michael, you may want to say hi to Robert. He's also on. Robert Butler.
Hi, Robert.
Hi, Mike.
Hi.
Nice to see you.
And Jani.
Yeah.
And we also have devotees today from Canada to Toronto. The Toronto Ramana group is joining us, and a few from Tampa. So our group is really growing now.
Yeah. Now with the London group, we have people from all over the world joining.
Right. So I'm a little bit, I'm as and when they come in, they're joining. I'm just not actively seeking.
Yeah. The active seeking, that's Bhagavan's work, not our work.
Exactly right. That's what I always tell people, that Bhagavan will select and send people,
Yes.
Thank you, Michael.
Right. Pleasure.
Namaskar.
Namaskar.